What if I told you that there is a type of vintage lens that has altogether defied recent price rises and remains cheap? What if I told you that these are high quality lenses that you can buy today from around 15 to 20 pounds or thereabouts? If you want to know what they are, keep watching. Well, hey everybody, thank you for checking in once again and welcome to another one. So, cheap lenses. These are some very cheap lenses and they start from around 15 to 20 pounds. They're probably the cheapest type of vintage lens you can buy, but they are also high quality lenses and they will make you some very nice images. I'm talking about the Tessars, Tessar lenses, like this Carl Zeiss Jena Tessar 50mm f2.8 sitting on the front of this Praktica LTL5, MTL5B. So this is a very, very, very nice lens and it comes from Carl Zeiss Jena, no less. They are famous for their quality of their lens manufacture in days gone by. In the film days, they made some very, very beautiful optics, including the lens that no 50mm has yet beat. That's the Pancola. This is the Tessar. It's a very, very sharp lens, and that's one of the inherent advantages of the Tessar design. It's a really old design. It goes back right into the 19th century. I forget the details. I'll put them up on screen because they're quite interesting. But it goes way back into the 19th century. And as I understand it, these lenses are still in use today. Any small lens in a point and shoot camera is likely to be a Tessar, as well as other larger lenses for mirrorless and DSLR and so forth. But these are from the film days and they're very fine lenses and they're very cheap lenses. So this Carl Zeiss Jena Tessar, well, you can still pick these up from around about £20 or thereabouts. The more usual price I've seen recently is around £40, but you can still get them for 20, but even at 40 they're still a pretty good buy. It's an f2.8 50mm, and that's another feature of Tessar lenses. The nature of the design, I'm not too sure of the technical details personally, but the nature of the design I do know means that it's very, very difficult to make a lens go wider than f2.8. There are Tessars wider than that, but they're likely to be pretty expensive because it's not an easy job to open that aperture up. You've got to do all sorts of optical tricks. So these are f2.8 lenses, but they're none the worse for that. You may think that having an f2.8 aperture will decrease the amount of potential background blur, and you'd be kind of right, but only kind of right, because background blur is a feature of three factors. That is focal length, aperture opening, but also the distance to your subject. The nearer you can go to your subject, the more background blur you will have. So this lens, in the Carl Zeiss Jena tradition, goes pretty close. It goes down to 35 centimeters, and in fact the dial turns just a little bit past there, so you might get 34 out of it, but even so, it's pretty close. That's about this distance, you know, the length of a ruler, so that's pretty close. And if you get close like that with this lens, you're going to get plenty of background blur, and it's really lovely background blur too. It's very soft, very delicious, very lovely. This lens comes in two flavors. There's a zebra version and this is the non-zebra version, the all black body. I think the zebra version may be radioactive. If you know whether these lenses, this lens, the CZJ Tessar, is radioactive, please do pop a comment down below. I don't think this one is because there's no yellowing, but the zebra one, there may be some radioactive elements in there. Okay, there's our little CZJ Tessar. It's not a very long lens. It does have the Carl Zeiss Jena design and sort of house style, so that's pretty nice. You can see there the focus scale, it focuses way down to 35 centimeters, so that's really cool. It's a nicely made lens. Most of it is metal. There may be some plastic, I think possibly the focus ring is plastic, but most of the lens is metal. And this is a really nicely made lens in the Carl Zeiss Jena tradition. The aperture ring is at the back here, f2.8 round to f22. Most of these will be in M42 mount flavour, and this is an M42 one. You can also get them in exacta bayonet mount, and those will be a little cheaper, but you know, these M42 versions are pretty cheap anyway. We've got an auto or manual switch on there. It's nothing fancy, it just means that if you're using it on a film camera, it will automatically stop down using this little mechanism here. Most of us, I guess, won't be using this on film cameras. Most of us will be shooting these on mirrorless, and a very nice little lens it is for mirrorless use. A really nice lens, very cheap, millions and millions and millions of them made. A genuine Carl Zeiss Jena lens, very, very high quality optic, all for, well, at the minimum £20, at the very most £40. If you buy one on a working or a non-working Praktica body, that's often the cheapest way to buy them, because the combo is not particularly expensive. Nice colour, good sharpness, nice blur too. A very nice little lens indeed. However, the fun with the Tessars does not stop there. We've got loads of them. There were many, many, many made. So I'm going to show you some more. Like this one, for example. This is the Fed 10, or it's sometimes called the Industar 10. It's a 50mm f3.5, and look, it's a collapsible, and how cool is that? I love these collapsible lenses. I love their look, but if you want to buy a Leica Elmar, which these are styled after quite obviously, if you want to buy an Elmar, you're looking at £200–300 these days, and between you and me, this lens will give just as good an image as the Elmar, if not better. But don't tell anyone, that's our secret, okay? This lens comes in uncoated and coated versions. This is the uncoated version. I love this lens because it gives a real pre-war look. I've just cleaned it up. If you've seen the episode a couple of weeks ago, I cleaned this lens thoroughly, and it's now a really nice optic, really clean, really clear, and ready for some action. This will give a really nice black and white image, and if you want the uncoated look, the sort of the pre-war look, this one will give it to you straight out of the box. Let's have a brief look. There's the little Fed lens, and is that not a thing of beauty? It's a very, very nicely made little piece of kit, and it's a very beautiful piece of kit as well. L39 mount, so it will mount to any Leica rangefinder, or indeed any L39 mount camera. The Feds and the Zorkis are a good example, but there are many others also. It's a beautiful little thing, and it's rather shorter than the Elmar also. The Elmar stands, I don't know, 2–3 millimeters taller than this Fed lens, so if you appreciate small size, this one is lovely. This one is uncoated, but there is also a coated version which actually gives very beautiful colours, some of the nicest colours I've seen from any vintage lens actually, so it's a great little optic. So yeah, coated and uncoated versions, as I say. The uncoated one gives the pre-war look, really nice for black and white. It will do you a nice colour shot, but the coated version is much, much nicer for colour shots. And that coated Fed 10, as I say, gives some of the nicest colour images that I've seen from any lens, and you know, they're quite saturated, they have a special quality all their own, they have a chromy sort of feel at times, so I just love the colours from that lens. Collapsible Tessars are a bit more expensive. maybe, I don't know, 60 to £100, something like that. But there is a copy of this lens sitting on eBay right now for £50. At least there was a couple of days ago if somebody hasn't snagged it. It just needs a clean. I showed you how to clean them a couple of weeks ago, so you might want to have a go at that. These are available, and if they need a little work, they can be available a little more cheaply. A very, very nice optic and great value at 60 to £100, as are, I should say, the later Industar collapsibles, like this Industar 22. It's a bit taller than the Fed. In fact, it's significantly taller than the Fed, almost a centimetre taller, but it is a lovely, lovely lens, and it's tuned for colour. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all the Industar 22s were coated. So it's a relatively modern image you're going to get out of these. Well, it's a vintage image, but it's a bit more modern than an uncoated one will give you. So again, very sharp, very good colours, nice background blur from these lenses as well. Although they're only f3.5, this goes for the Fed 10 as well. Although they're only f3.5, how much blur do we really need? They're rangefinder lenses, so they'll go to 3 feet only. That's the minimum focus distance. But at that distance, at f3.5, if you're reasonably close to your subject, between 3 to 6 feet, you will get some background blur that will separate your subject from your background. It won't give you too much blur, but you don't want too much blur because too much is too much, and we wouldn't want that. So I reckon these lenses will give sufficient background blur for most photographic needs. They're not blur monsters, especially the rangefinder lenses. This Carl Zeiss Jena Tessar is an SLR lens, so it will go much closer. But these rangefinder lenses, 3 feet minimum focus distance, unless you adjust them or muck about with them. But I wouldn't suggest doing that because you might spoil a nice old vintage piece of kit. I'll just show you this one quickly. So there's our little Industar 22 lens. This is a very beautiful lens. It's very, very nicely made. I mean, the Elmars are nicely made, but this one is within an ace of that quality, and it's probably of equal quality, to be honest. I can't see there's very much difference in them in both manufacture and the quality of the image. Now there is another Tessar which I'd like to show you that also comes in collapsible flavour. I don't have a collapsible version of it, but it does come in both rigid and collapsible versions. This is the rigid version. It's the Industar 50mm f3.5. This is perhaps the ugliest lens ever made, the rigid version, and it stands in extraordinary contrast to the grace, style and chrome platedness of the collapsible version, but nevertheless, that's not important. This thing, this little optic, will make you a very, very nice image indeed. The optics are identical between the collapsible version and the rigid version, so this one is at no disadvantage. There is a cost difference. The rigid version will cost about, I don't know, you can find these from £15. You might even find them for less. They've not really gone up in price with the huge inflation of vintage lenses. They've kind of missed that because I think nobody really wants them. They're an f3.5 50. They're not particularly good looking, and they are overlooked, I think, in favour of other lenses. But if you're wise, if you're smart, if you're savvy, you will not overlook this lens, because this lens is very, very sharp, gives fantastic colour, and it will go down to, this is a rangefinder version, so it will go down to 3 feet only. However, there was also an SLR version of this lens made, which will focus rather closer to about 50 or 45 centimeters. Those are just as readily available and just as cheap So a solid one you can get for about, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 pounds. They're really, 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 really cheap. If you want a collapsible one, that will cost you more. Maybe, I don't know, 60 to 100 pounds, something like that. They do look fantastic, but this one has just as good optical qualities. Let's have a quick look at the lens, and here it is in all its extraordinary visual flavour. I've never seen a lens designed quite like this, and I can't think quite what the designers were thinking to make it look like this, but nevertheless, appearances don't matter. Beauty is only skin deep. This one doesn't have very much of it, but that doesn't matter because it makes very, very nice images. And if you really want a collapsible version, you can get one. These lenses tend to have the purple coating that was used in the former Soviet optical factories during the 1950s and early 1960s. Those are better coatings in my experience than the ones that came later, and this one has it, so that's nice. So a beautiful little optic, at least figuratively speaking in the case of the solid version, literally speaking in the case of the collapsible version, but very beautiful optics, and this will make very beautiful images for you. If you want to go a little closer, down to 50 centimeters or so, get the SLR version. That will also allow you to make more background blur if that's your thing. But even at 3 feet, 4 feet, this one will make some background blur and separate your subject from your background. So a great little lens. L39 mount, again, nice small adapter on your mirrorless. So another fantastic little Tessar. As indeed is this lens. This is the Industar 26. So we've got a lot of Industars today, and they really went to town on that Tessar design. In fact, that's not a bad thing, because if you stick with the same design, like this Fed 10, this was a Tessar, this was a 1930s lens, and develop that all the way right up until the 1980s, 1990s, then that is some real good lens development. Sticking with one design is not necessarily a bad thing for lens development. So we end up with the Industar 26. This one I think is from the late 50s sometime. Do correct me if I'm wrong, late 50s, early 60s. And this is a nice little optic. It's got quite a few aperture blades actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10. They're a bit small to count, but it's got 9 or 10. So you're going to get nice circular bokeh balls from this lens. It tends to give a lower contrast image than most, if not all, in fact all, of the ones that we've looked at today, except perhaps for the pre-war lens. So this lens, the Industar 26, is a good choice if you want to make some low contrast shots, but you want a coated lens. I think, I can see the purple coatings on this lens, but I think they must have been fairly minimally applied, or perhaps applied to only one surface, because this is a low contrast lens and light does seem to get to some extent absorbed in the glass as it's passing through there. So this is great for low contrast shots, for 1930s style shots. If you want to do low contrast black and white, low contrast color, this lens will do it for you. It's all metal and they're all in this nice polished aluminium flavor. We can have a quick look over here. So there is our little Industar 26 Tessar lens, and it's a very beautiful, very highly polished little thing. This one's in nice condition, everything turns cleanly and smoothly, but these lenses are very easy to service yourself actually. They're really, really simple to take apart. You can see perhaps the 10 aperture blades there opening and closing as I turn the mechanism, so nice round bokeh balls will result from that. There's the L39 mount at the back, and there's the rangefinder cam that moves in and out if you mount it on a rangefinder camera to give you focusing on your rangefinder mechanism. One of these lenses will cost around 20 to 30 pounds. The Industar 26 is not a particularly sought after lens, even amongst these cheaper Tessar design lenses. This is not a particularly sought after lens. I think perhaps because of that low contrast look. I think perhaps people are looking for a higher contrast look, but it's a nicely made lens. It gives a very nice image if you like the low contrast look. It's very well made. It's easy to service. It's an f2.8 lens, so it will give you a little more blur than the collapsibles, the Industars 10, 22 and 50 that we looked at. Those are only f3.5 lenses. This is an f2.8, so if you're shooting at, I don't know, anywhere up to 6 feet, you'll get some separation if you shoot wide open. You won't lose too much sharpness either if you shoot wide open, although if you stop down to 5.6 or f8, you will get an immensely sharp image out of any of these lenses. They're inherently sharp to begin with, and stopping down only makes them sharper. This is a nice little lens. You can often buy them on a camera. I got this one on this incredible looking Fed 3 rangefinder. I do love the look of this camera. The Zorki 3 is quite popular, and the Fed 3 doesn't seem to be quite so popular, but it's got a similar very kooky design, and I think it looks great. And that's where I got this lens. I did pay around £30, but that was about 2 to 3 years ago. I've had this one for a while. Nowadays it's not going to be much different. You're going to pay, I don't know, for a lens on its own, 20 to 40 pounds. For a lens on a camera, maybe 30 to 60 pounds. So a great little lens. Yours for the buying, if you wish. Finally, possibly the most common of the Tessars, almost certainly the most common of the former Soviet Tessars. This is the Industar 61, made in Ukraine, as I understand it, from about the late 60s right up until the early 90s or mid 90s. Sometime these lenses were made. You will also find a later lens than this, the Industar 61 LD. Right, now those are no different. The later lens and this lens, this Zebra Design 61, are no different. This one has a very slightly radioactive element added to its glass, lanthanum, and the later ones also have lanthanum added. That's what the LD means. So to actually mark it as LD with lanthanum added, that was a kind of a marketing thing. But the later lenses are no different to this one. When I got my Fed 4 camera in 1978, the camera came with an Industar 61, and in the instruction manual it explained that lanthanum had been added to the optics during production, so no difference. This is a very, very nice lens. In fact, it was the only lens I had for many years. It's a very, very nice lens. It's a rangefinder lens. There was a macro version of this lens made. That costs around about £100, which is nothing like the cost of this lens, which nowadays will cost you between 20 to 30 pounds on its own. If you buy it on a camera, you might get it for that and the camera as well, same price. So there was a macro version, but this is a rangefinder version. It focuses down to 3 feet, same as all the other rangefinder lenses that we've looked at today. This is an earlier one, and I think the earlier ones have nicer coatings. You'll see in a moment this has the purple coatings that I think are the best of the former Soviet coatings. They were from the early 60s, late 60s sometime, and the formula seems to have changed in the 70s to a more orangey looking one. This is an early one. You can tell because it's marked in feet. In fact, let's have a closer look and I'll show you. So there you can see those purpley blue coatings, and those are the nicest coatings to find on a former Soviet lens in my experience. You can see that this lens is unusual in that it's marked in feet. They're usually marked in meters, but this one is marked in feet. So sort my exposure out. So that's how you can tell it's an earlier one, and you may find that the earlier ones make nicer images. I have found that, so I guess you will find that also. So an early lens, blue coatings are marked in feet rather than meters. That's the UK market only, of course, so in Europe or in North America, in the USA, you're going to want to look at the serial number. This one begins 68, so that gives you a clue as to the age of the lens. I can't tell you any particular details about the serial numbers, but 68 certainly indicates early, so I guess 69 would indicate early, 67 would indicate early, 70 would indicate early, and so on. This lens has great colour, it has good contrast, although wide open at f2.8 the contrast is slightly lower than it is if you stop the lens down. It gives very nice, very smooth background blur without any tricks or surprises, and that's generally true of these Tessars. They do give very nice, very smooth, reliably smooth background blur that doesn't collapse or have a nervous breakdown or turn rough at any point during the range of focus adjustments, over the focus range, over the changing range between camera, subject and background. Blur from Tessars does stay remarkably smooth. The radioactive element added to this one, lanthanum, is only very, very slightly radioactive. It's not the same as the thorium that was added later to a lot of SLR lenses. That is very highly radioactive. This isn't, and there's pretty much, as I understand it, do check for yourself, but as I understand it, there's pretty much no danger from a lanthanum equipped lens, because lanthanum is a material with very, very low radioactivity, but it certainly does its job in transmitting the colour and the light through these lenses, and it'll give you a really nice final image. Cost, not particularly expensive. None of these lenses are particularly expensive. This one used to cost, you used to be able to get these for around a tenner, now maybe 20 to 30 quid. You can get them on a camera for that as well. So a very, very nice little lens, very cheap, very practical, and it did really well. Actually, I tested this against the Siena Pancolar last week, stopped down to f8, and it did really well. I could scarcely put a hair between those two lenses, stopped down to f8. So this will give you some very nice images if you want to stop it down as well. So there we are, 6 fantastic little lenses, from the very cheap and optically capable solid Industar 50 here, to the equally optically capable Fed 10, Industar 22 and Industar 50 collapsible lenses, and all points betwixt and between. These lenses are tremendous value. Some of them come in SLR versions. There are many rangefinder versions of these lenses, but some of them come in SLR lenses as well. This Industar 50 certainly does, and the Siena Tessar is an SLR lens, and this must be, gosh, perhaps the best kept secret in vintage lenses at the moment. So some really nice lenses. If you're new to vintage lenses, these are an ideal place to start. You can give one a try and not really have to spend out too much cash in trying vintage lenses for the first time. If you've already got some vintage lenses and you want to try a different kind of lens, you want to try the Tessars, they're all accessible and they're all really cheap for what they are as well. So in my view, with a Tessar, you just absolutely cannot go wrong. So I guess that's about it from me for this week. Many thanks for tuning in and watching. I really do appreciate that. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do chuck us a sub. That would be appreciated as well. Many, many thanks go to subscribers for your subscription and your support. I really do appreciate that. Many, many thanks for that. Many, many thanks also go to patrons for your support. Without that, this show couldn't be made in the way that it is. So many, many thanks for that. Many thanks to anybody who's tuned in, watched, given a comment, left thanks, super thanks, or engaged with the channel in any way. Thank you very much. And if you think that this channel isn't doing too bad a job of keeping the old gear alive, the old cameras and lenses alive, and showcasing what this gear can actually do, then you might want to become a patron as well. You can do that over at www.patreon.com/Zenography, and you can do that for as little as $1 per month. As for me, that is it for now. But if you're not doing anything too difficult, engaging, or downright irksome next week, please do join me and tune in for a spot more Zenography. Until then, cheerio all.